if stage 1 and stage 2 are selling and stage 3 is consulting, telling people, stage 4 is coaching. There's a complete shift in what actually takes place in those conversations. And my experience is that when you're having those kind of conversations, and it's not about the money anymore, it's not about products anymore. They're just kind of irrelevant. Not irrelevant, but they're certainly a lot less important. What's really important is, what do you want your life to look like?
Welcome to episode 32 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm joined by Brian Foster, founder of the Financial Caddie, a free global network of forward-thinking financial planners based in beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. Brian has been a financial planner for over 30 years and has been on all sides of the business. He's also been advising and coaching financial advisors around the world since 2012. In this episode, we're talking through what Brian describes as the 4 stages, starting with product sales, to assets under management, progressing to financial planning, and then you'll have to listen to the end where we discuss what stage 4 is and what makes it the most valuable stage for both you and your clients. And stage 4 is so important for listeners around the world to understand that Brian and I have already agreed to do a separate episode entirely dedicated to it. So to join the free Financial Caddie network and learn more about Brian and how he helps advisors reach stage 4, go to innovatingadvice.com/episode 32. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kate. How you doing?
I am doing great. Brian, we've been having a lot of fun conversations lately about how people progress throughout the industry, how they enter the industry, a lot of places around the world that maybe don't yet have a lot of options for how you either enter or progress through the industry. And you and I have a lot of similar experiences and thoughts on where this should be going, changes that are needed, changes we're seeing around the world already, and encouraging people in countries you might even not think about. Places like Bulgaria we were chatting about before, where I've had the pleasure of visiting. You've talked to really passionate people there. So all over the world, there are people wanting to do better in the profession, wanting to really provide that client-centric advice. But it can take a while to get there. So we're talking through, as you describe it, and I love it, 4 stages. So let's dive in and start with stage 1. That is how most people enter. It's kind of that sales process. I would say I'm fortunate. I've actually never sold a product in my life. I'll jump in at stage 2, but talk us through what stage 1 is and what that looks like for most people.
Yeah, you've not had to unlearn all the lessons that everybody else has had to learn, Kate. That's a real advantage, let me tell you. So, like most financial advisors, I was never trained to be a financial advisor or a planner. I was trained to sell products. I was trained by the industry to sell products. So for me, that was 1988.
Yeah.
And stage 1. So I call stage 1 brokers. So there are lots of people out there that call themselves brokers. So that's the term I use. And just for fun, I give these personas a Latin name, and the Latin name for broker is Sellus Maximus. And I think most people know what that means. And so the industry pulls us in. This is still happening today. It's actually insane. The industry pulls us in, and the message typically is, you've got unlimited earnings potential and you're going to be running a business. You're going to be running your own business.
Yep.
And so people like that idea, right? Particularly younger people. And I remember that was exactly the position I was in. And we come into the business, and what we realize is that we've got to get out there and basically sell stuff. We've got to sell products, insurance products typically. And so one of the questions I ask brokers is what is your product? Yeah. And actually the product is not your product. The product is somebody else's product. It's the insurance company's product. So you don't have a product. So if you don't have a product, then you don't have a business, actually. So so we come in, and then we get this compensation model, which is initial commission normally. And so, we go out there and we try and find some people to sell these products to. We do our sales training, the great sales training we're given. And then maybe we make a sale, and it takes a long time to get to the point where you actually get paid. And what you soon realize is that the payment you get is actually a loan. It's a loan from the insurance company. And if you can keep the policy on the books for a couple of years, then we write the loan off and you get to keep the money. And if you can't keep the policy on the books, then we're going to take the money back under this beautiful term that the industry has coined called a clawback. Yeah, and so we've got this eat what you kill model, keeps us on this transaction treadmill right from the get-go, and yet we still think we're running a business. So for me, that was working in an estate agency company, arranging mortgages and selling insurance on the back of mortgages. People came to me because they wanted to buy a house, they needed a mortgage, but I was there to sell them some insurance. And you realize after a while that you're on this transaction treadmill and you're not running a business. There's zero business value, actually, if you're the broker. So I think that's a model that most people kind of cut their teeth on. And one day they wake up and they realize there's no real value in this. This is not a business model that I want to take forward. Some people never get to that stage. Some people, continue to do that through their entire career.
Yeah, and they win all sorts of awards sometimes for being top salespeople. And I've got a lot of thoughts on how some of those awards should be structured. But as you think about this, one of the other challenges is that we know it's a complete conflict of interest. And in terms of not building a business, because you have so much pressure to eat what you kill, then, as I've been talking with advisors, even over the last couple of weeks, it doesn't seem a lot of ability to really try to focus on a niche client that you can help, or, really specialize in any one area. It tends to just be about sell as much as you can so that you've got that paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the expression we often use is, you go and prospect for anybody with a pulse.
Yep.
And frankly, some advisors aren't that fussy. So anybody will do. You have your lists. Maybe you have your cold calling. You try and get as many people in as possible. And then what you're doing is you're trying to fit the product or the products that you've got, a range of products that you've got to that particular client. And I think that's just the wrong way around. There's a whole bunch of conflicts. Some people feel uncomfortable with them. Some people don't. For me personally, after a while, that was something that made me feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've always kind of said is they are salespeople, and there is absolutely a space for salespeople. I have life insurance myself. I've got insurance policies. I need someone that's going to know those products inside and out and be able to support that. When I had my advice practice, I partnered with, trusted product providers that I did trust to walk me through, because I wasn't going to be the expert in that area. But that's just it, as they are salespeople. Do you think we're ever going to see a time when they will just rightfully call themselves and own it as being a salesperson and not trying to mask it and say they're an advisor or a wealth manager?
Simple answer, no. I don't think we will see that time. And I think the better question, the sort of deeper question is, why is that happening? Why is it that they have to call themselves something else? And my perspective on that, my view on that, is that the big life offices have put what we would call financial planning in the way of intermediation. So there is a pressure to call yourself something else, a financial planner, a wealth manager, whatever the language is that we're going to use. But there's a complete incongruence between what you're describing yourself as and what's actually happening. And the reason I don't think that's going to change is because I think in the mindset of these larger organizations is a sort of fear that if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to justify putting these people in front of potential customers. So yeah, I don't think that's going to change. I may be wrong, of course, but I don't think that's going to change.
Well, and one of the things I've also seen, and this has, again, come up in conversations just recently, I'm wondering if with the pandemic and people's jobs being uncertain and some positions being put off, if people are giving this more thought, is especially people that do go that wirehouse route, I have found that they tend to not ever be exposed to what other options are or what other paths are.
Yes. That's absolutely right. I mean, I've been having this conversation with larger organizations, and what is the motivation for them to put what we would call financial planning in front of clients. They're using the language. I mean, recently this year I went to see a couple of large banks, and they are using the language of financial coaching, lifestyle financial planning, behavioral finance, that, they're using that language. And when I asked them, so show me what's happening in terms of the actual work that your financial planners are doing. And they're happy to admit, we're just pumping out product, really. And I think that incongruence is really dangerous. And the reason it's really dangerous is because it means that the public out there don't understand the difference. They've got no idea what financial planning is and what the difference is between a financial planner and a broker, for example. So I think it's confusing.
Well, that's one reason I would love to see the separation, because if they just own it as salespeople that can partner with financial planners and advisors, that, this is a piece of the financial puzzle, it's kind of creating a bigger pie for everyone, and a pie that everyone knows what they're eating.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there should be a partnership between the industry and the profession. But when you've got all the power and all the control and all the money on one side of that equation, then it's very difficult. So I think there's got to be a bit of a battle, to be perfectly honest, in the short term. But I'd love to see a partnership between the industry and the profession at some point.
Yeah. And then before we jump to stage 2, what are the upsides of people that start into this sales model? I mean, so often, and we're going to talk about, having a financial advice or planning practice and the challenges of, a lot of times people aren't comfortable selling themselves, even if they're selling, financial advice and doing the right thing and trying to get clients. That's not a skill that everyone has developed. So is there an upside there in terms of learning some of those skills early on in your career that you can apply down the line?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, look, it costs money to do training, and it costs money to develop yourself. And, if you do that outside of a large organization, then I guess you have to pay for it yourself, or you have to be part of an organization that's going to pay for it. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So that sales training has got to be beneficial, but I think it's got to be pointed in the right direction. And I'm just not convinced it is at the moment. So I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with brokers as long as everybody is clear that that's what they're doing, and the client comes to them for that specific thing, and that they don't think they're getting something else. That's actually the key point.
Yep, exactly. I completely agree. So then moving on to stage 2, some people, like I did, either enter at stage 2 or, over time progress from 1 to 2. And that's really around the assets under management. So give us a quick history of how that model came to be.
Yeah. So in my case, I was sort of 8 years a mortgage broker, and then I decided there was a bigger world out there. And one of the key motivations for me was the idea that I could build a recurring revenue. Everybody was telling me, no, you've got to build a recurring revenue model. And so I became stage 2 an investment advisor. And I give this guy a Latin name. And you realize I'm talking about myself here as much as I'm talking about anybody else. So I give this guy the rather unflattering name of Torcus Bollicus, because I basically spent the next few years talking rubbish. The game here is really gathering assets. Okay. And typically the conversation is around asset allocation, fund selection, and investment performance. And the promise that we're kind of making to clients is, come to me, I can help you make more money or stop you losing money. And we get involved in all sorts of weird and wonderful, well, not so wonderful investment structures. And we just, we talk to clients about standard deviation and asset allocation and, alpha and beta and all this rubbish. And we get immersed in this conversation. And that's what I did. I headed to the bright lights of London in 1994 to go and work in a firm that I thought was a stockbroking firm, because I thought that's what this was all about. And it was a bit of a shock, because it was really, the question I ask is the client the client, or is the client's money the client? And the reality for a lot of these advisors is that actually, if the client isn't bringing any money, then I'm not interested.
Yep.
We segment our client basis on the basis of how much assets under management each client has got, and it's like, that's just bonkers. And then what do? We build up a business. Well, it's not really a business, but we build up this business, we build up this book. And then how do we exit? We sell the client's money to somebody else. We sell the income stream that comes off the client's money to someone else. And you've got people running around basically talking about their assets my assets under management. And we have this little competition to see who's got the most assets under management. And the client just gets left behind. So we still don't have our own product. We're still selling somebody else's products. It's now just an investment management product. And investment managers are quite happy to put on workshops and conferences where you can meet all the managers, and they'll tell you how fantastic their performance is, and they'll give you some statistics that will back that up and some fancy graphs. And every single one of them seems to say the same thing. And yet the evidence, suggests that maybe that's not right. And I think the biggest challenge here is that financial planners are building a promise into their business that they can't actually control.
Yes.
Which we're now discovering, of course, we're at this point in time again where we have a fall in the markets. And so it's kind of crazy. You've got this situation where all those C and D clients that you've sold investments to that have been quite happily in the background suddenly start coming out of the woodwork. And they're asking you, what's going on? So your workload goes up and your revenue goes down. And, it's a crazy situation. And I think we're making promises, or we're being asked to make promises that we can't really keep as our value proposition. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's as you said, it's what's celebrated in the industry. And again, going back to those lists, and I have long had issues with all these lists, but I've even reached out to journalists because it's, the list is who has the most assets under management. And that tells me nothing about how they're actually helping their clients. And you're right, everyone's like, this is my AUM. And I was like, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean you know what you're doing. That actually means you were probably good in stage 1 and you learned how to sell, and you just shifted those skills to, gathering assets.
Yeah. I mean, I know some good firms and some good advisors that have got lots of assets under management, but I only know that because I understand their businesses. As a measurement of success, it doesn't really tell you anything other than the fact that they've been able to gather up a load of people's money.
Yep. But it did come from a good place. I mean, it was a lot of times people, back in the 90s and looking at the commission situation and going, I don't believe in that model. There has to be a better way to help people. And so they thought, okay, instead of selling you products, I'm going to manage your assets. And so it was all well-intentioned. And like I said, that's how I got into the industry. And I worked in I'll call it a family investment advisory firm. My mom was a principal and had a partner. It was a great business model and, very successful. I was meant to take over and I could have had an amazing life and made great money. But as I kept having conversations, it didn't really make sense to me. Just fundamentally, I didn't understand how this was working because, as you said, looking at kind of segmenting clients, after a number of years, I did become a principal in the firm. And when I sat down and I was tracking everything and I was looking at, okay, who do we talk to the most? Who is taking the most withdrawals? Who has the most concerns? And it was those C&D clients. They're the ones that needed the help. And oftentimes the A clients, we talk to them every quarter, but they didn't need a lot. And because we were only talking about their investments, there were no other conversations. We weren't talking about, do you have college savings for your kids? Do you have an estate plan? What's your legacy? It was only about investments. I didn't get it. And I did all of the billing and I knew how much they paid us. And I was like, from a business standpoint, it was a great business, but it's like, why are you paying us all this money?
Well, I think there's a complete disconnect. There's a complete disconnect between the client and how we get paid for what we do when we're only looking at it from that perspective. And the real, I think I had my sort of first midlife crisis in the mid-1990s on a train going into this office in London. And I had this sudden realization. It was a bit of a catalyst. There's got to be more to life than just chasing money. That was the first time that I really asked myself that question. I was unfulfilled in doing what I was doing. And I just knew I was in the wrong place. Have you ever known you've just been in the wrong place? It's an uncomfortable feeling. Yeah. So, I mean, the assets under management model is I think the prevalent model. Like 98% of all the financial advisory businesses in the world are operating on that model at the moment. And I think that's going to be challenged.
Yeah. And that'll be the thing with the commoditization of investment management. I mean, I personally don't think the AUM model will survive, which is why I actually left. I mean, I came to a crossroads of, hey, Kate, you can take over this business, I guess, or not, which there was only one path, but I created a left turn. And I was like, and this was back in 2013. I did not, and I still do not believe that the AUM model is going to survive in the long term. Yeah. And, being young, I was like, I don't want to take over a business that A, I don't think should exist, and B, I don't think will exist.
That's quite challenging to confront that, though, Kate. I mean, that's an uncomfortable feeling for people. I can imagine there are people listening to this conversation feeling uncomfortable at the moment. I have a habit of doing that, by the way. So,
yep.
But I think that's necessary.
Well, it is. And that's often the only time that we grow. And you have to listen to your inner gut. I mean, it's often ourselves that are trying to have those uncomfortable conversations, but we just push them down. Yeah. And so, that's a big thing I'm trying to do with the podcast is share, hey, you've probably had these things in the back of your mind or in your gut, or, the universe has been poking these messages out at you here and there. And it often takes a number of times of hearing something to go, oh, I should be listening to that inner message and confronting it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the point at which that really happened was in the UK so it was kind of the end of the dot-com boom and bust. We had 3 consecutive years of negative returns. And, I was having really difficult conversations with my clients, and they were saying, you've kind of made all these promises and you've got no control. And I was like, we can't be doing this. This isn't where our value is.
Yep. So stage 1, you learned how to sell products. Stage 2, you learn how to gather as many assets under management as possible. And then talk us through what stage 3 is.
So stage 3 was an interesting time. So I joined, I decided that, so I left London. I had a little bit of a moment on the train where I decided there must be more to life than chasing money. I'm originally from Oxford in the UK, so I joined an accountancy practice in Oxford, and they wanted to set up a financial planning business. So there were 2 of us that set up this business. We had a blank sheet of paper. And it was at that point that I moved into stage 3, which I call a financial planner. And now we have a product. We have a product. It's called a financial plan.
Yep.
Okay. So, and you'll be familiar with this. So we use the 6-step financial planning process. So we got the Financial Planning Standards Board. We've got the 6-step financial planning process. So we go and do our exams, get really well qualified. We learn lots about estate planning, about investment management, about tax planning, right, and all this great stuff. And we become a financial planner, and that was where that happened for me. And I had 12 years in the firm. We built that firm from scratch, and it was a great firm. And we started charging people for financial plans, and we would then churn out 50-page reports, which became 70-page reports, which became 100-page reports. And it was full of lots of pretty graphs. And this process is really interesting because we're told that you sit with a client and you ask about their goals. So we sit in the sort of first meeting, we ask the client about their goals, and they're supposed to know the answer to that question. So they give us a list of all these things that they're supposed to want to do in their life, and it's all the things that we know and love, like retire before I'm 65 and send my children to university. And I'm like, who's creating these goals? Are we creating these goals for people, or is that really what's going on for them? But anyway, we've got these goals, and then we do this amazing shortfall analysis, and then we go and use this piece of technology and we put together this financial plan. And while we're doing that, we do all the research on the products and the solutions and the recommendations, and we put together this great big report, and it's a beautiful piece of work. Okay, it's a beautiful piece of work. All right, it takes us forever, and then that we've dotted the I's, we've crossed the T's, and then we present this thing to the client who hasn't even engaged with the problem yet.
Yeah.
And I've done it. I've sat there and I've charged clients lots and lots of money to produce this thing, and it is a work of art. And we are clever, and this is good stuff, right? And yet the client hasn't engaged with it mostly. So they either say yes, that's great, because they don't really know any different, and then they just do whatever you tell them to do because they trust you. Or often they'll say no. Now you've done all this work, you don't know how to charge for this work because you're still relying on getting paid by a product or by gathering the assets. And there are a lot of really, really, really good financial planners out there that are struggling at the moment with getting paid for the great work that they're doing.
Yep.
And my sense is that the reason that's a problem is because the whole process is too long, takes too long to deliver. It's not that it's not good work. It is really, really good work from really good people, but it takes too long to deliver. It's not engaging for the clients. And this step is like, it's where you get into the professional financial planning community. But, and then I think there's this sense that now that you've got your qualifications and you've got all this knowledge, you are the expert. And
well, it's what we are taught to do. I mean, that's the process, right? Is you're taught that this is what financial planning is, that this is what you're supposed to create in a number of places. From a regulatory and compliance perspective, you're required to create these thorough documents and have all this backup to everything. And I have actually never in my life created a financial plan. As I was going through the process, I credit the fact that my degree is in photography, and my creative brain thankfully takes over sometimes and goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. And as I was learning about what financial planning was, it just fundamentally did not make any sense to me at all. And I was thinking, okay, this is not something that I would ever go through as a client. Like, this process does not sound like something that is, as you said, engaging or even that informative. I mean, to me, it's just wildly overwhelming. And you're right, there's that technical knowledge and there's a lot of good stuff in there. But the other big thing is it doesn't account for life.
No.
And it doesn't, you create this huge document, and you noted, I mean, it's a ton of time, a ton of effort. And what if you create a financial plan in January of 2020? Show me a financial plan anywhere on this planet that predicted and accounted for a global pandemic in, March of 2020.
Yeah, I didn't produce one. So no, I completely agree. And what if you get in, so you've created this report and you get into the presentation meeting with the client, and what if you've got some numbers wrong, or the client says, no, that's not right, or the client says, well, what if we do this?
Exactly.
What are you going to do now? You're going to go back into just hold fire. I'm just going to go back and redo the report for you. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
I'm not sure about that.
So talk us through what stage 4 is and how you got from stage 3 to stage 4. Okay.
So there was a point here. This was a real moment for me. I was a good golfer. I'd won our club championship for twice in the space of 3 years, and I wanted to know. I had a burning question. I wanted to know how good my golf could get if I played every day and practiced every day. And so a friend of mine had an apartment in Cape Town, and he said, "Why don't you go and spend 6 months in South Africa playing golf every day?" And this sounded like a really good idea. He said, "It's
Yes.
warm, the weather's good, the golf courses are fantastic." So it was actually a really scary thing to do. The concept of not being at work for 6 months, it was unpaid, so I didn't get paid. And I spent a ton of money doing this. And I remember ticking off all the things on my to-do list to make sure this thing was going to happen. And I got to the bottom. I got to the sort of last thing on my list. And I was like, "Ooh, honey, there's no reason why I can't go now." And I remember I almost bailed. It was quite scary, even though it was something that I wanted to do. So yeah, I came to South Africa. I kissed my mum goodbye at the airport and came to South Africa, and I spent 6 amazing months in South Africa playing golf. And 2 weeks in, I got an opportunity to play in a professional qualifying tournament, and I got through the qualifier. And they said, if you want to play in the event, you've got to turn professional. And so I was like, okay, so what's involved? And they said, no, you just have to sign away your amateur status. You sign this form. So I signed this form and became a golf professional and teed it up in a professional tournament with people I'd heard of, right? And then for the next 6 months, I was playing all over South Africa. I mean, I was literally living my dream, Kate, right? As a good golfer, I was literally living my dream, and I was making it up as I was going along. And it was just amazing. And like I say, it cost me a lot of money. And I was worried about, what am I going to do when I get back, and all that kind of stuff. So that was a real moment for me. And then I went back to the UK, and the first thing that happened was I went to see my parents, and my mum was diagnosed at that point with dementia. My mum was 58, actually.
Wow.
And it was a real shock. And so 12 months later, she was in full-time nursing care. My dad couldn't cope. My dad's about 6 years older, so he would have been about 64. So he's just coming up to this thing called retirement. And now his wife isn't there anymore to share all the things, the dreams. They've got dreams, they've got things they wanted to do. She's not there anymore. She's in this nursing home, and she died when she was 62 in that nursing home. Oh. And so that period, particularly that sort of 6-month period where I'm living, I'm kind of living the dream. I'm doing what I really wanted to do with my life and my money. And now that's juxtaposed with my mum's situation where that's not available to her anymore, and my dad, in fact. So that was, life. I think life whispers sometimes at you.
Yep.
Occasionally there's somebody whispering in your ear saying, catch a little bit of wake up call. And then sometimes somebody comes along and just hits you over the head with a baseball bat. And that for me was that moment. So I wanted to tell that story because I think, we've been talking about what's the catalyst for the change. And often I think this catalyst is the word meaning. Right, so I'm a financial planner at stage 3, doing great financial planning, writing these reports, and then it's like, hold on a minute, what's the real meaning of all of this work that I'm doing? And lots of financial planners that I speak to might not necessarily be able to articulate it that way, but that's actually what's happened. There's been an event, there's been something that's really affected them, and we're asking ourselves, what's the meaning of life? Actually, it's that deep.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
You must have felt that because I know you've been.
Oh yeah.
You've been on that journey, right?
Multiple times.
So what is the transition then to stage 4? So the transition for me into stage 4 is the separation of, let's call it advice, planning, and coaching from intermediation. And instead of selling a financial plan, it's now about co-creating an experience with clients that helps them to achieve the best life possible with the money they have available, which is kind of, I think, what financial planning is all about. So stage 4, we can call it lifestyle financial planning, financial life planning, life planning. I don't think it really has a name yet that everybody can sort of agree on. Yeah, right. So there's all these different pockets going on. It's happening.
Yep.
But I think there's something fundamental that shifts here. And the shift is, if stage 1 and stage 2 are selling, and stage 3 is consulting, telling people, yep. Stage 4 is coaching. There's a complete shift in what actually takes place in those conversations. And my experience is that when you're having those kind of conversations, and it's like the money, it's not about the money anymore. It's not about products anymore. They're just kind of irrelevant. Not irrelevant, but they're certainly a lot less important. What's really important is what do you want your life to look like? What's happening for you? And I think even if we're not coaches, I'm not a professionally trained coach, but I have what I call a coaching style conversation.
Yep.
And it literally changes the game for clients. And so I have this business called the Financial Caddie, and the concept of the Financial Caddie is that if you understand golf and you understand the nature of the relationship between a player and the caddy, right? It's you and me against the world. The caddy is sort of part psychologist, part bag carrier. Yeah, he cleans the clubs and does all that stuff. But that's not where the value is in the relationship. It's a partnership. It's a partnership, and it's you and me against the world. And I think that is the analogy. That's why I call the business the Financial Caddie. That's the analogy that I use for this relationship that we have in this lifestyle financial planning proposition.
So the caddy, it's having that technical knowledge. So a lot of what you get in stage 3 or even in other stages. And as we look at professional designations and qualifications, it's generally the technical side of everything, but then bridging it with that coaching. And even in my business, I used to say, as I would describe what I did, people would say back to me, they're like, oh, you're like a financial coach. And so I started using that, and it's like it instantly resonated with people. And because of how I structured my business, that made a lot more sense. And there absolutely is this big conversation going on right now between that technical side and the coaching side. And is it the same? Are they two distinct things? And I'm seeing a lot of talk on social media that they're very different and that they serve different purposes. And I can see in some areas where that's true, but I think they're not, like, they need to be put together. They need to be combined. And that's where you get that lifestyle financial planning. So since it's not, the training isn't coming through the professional designations, How do you help people reach that stage 4?
That's a great question. And, connected to that question is everybody right to go to stage 4? So one of the things that I've been seeing here in South Africa, everybody's got a behavioral coaching program, right, at the moment. And so there's an organization here that's running a behavioral coaching program that's quite successful. But what I'm hearing is that a lot of people that go on it don't fully get the value from it. And I think the reason for that is that they're not ready. They're not ready. And I've been asking myself the question, what is it about behavioral coaching, and what is it about these people not being ready? And it's not to say that behavioral coaching isn't super important. It is super important, but I don't think we can go out and tell people that that's what so you're coming to me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how not to behave irrationally. Okay. I'm not so sure I want to buy that. Actually,
yep.
That's not what I'm buying. It's something that sits inside. It's a bit like financial planning. People don't know what financial planning is. It just sits inside this vehicle that we're using to take these people on this journey, which is why I think what we've got to do is talk to people about what it is that they want their life to look like. The behavioral coaching and the financial planning is just the stuff that happens underneath the surface. And yet people are trying to sell behavioral coaching to clients. And I don't think that's working. I mean, I'd be very interested to hear what your audience thinks. I'd be interested to know what you think. I mean, you're doing the same thing. Do you sell yourself as somebody who is going to stop people making dumb mistakes with money? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it's the whole, telling people what not to do doesn't really work. It's the bringing it into their why. Why does it matter to them? Why should they care? You have to make it personal to them, and just telling people, don't eat junk food or don't spend too much time sitting in front of a TV. I mean, those things, everybody knows that doesn't really help. You need to make it, well, why would I make those behavioral changes? And if you do bring it to, okay, what do you actually want in life? Then they're not focused on what they can't have or shouldn't have. They're focused on getting to where they actually want to be once they have taken the time. And most clients, you have to have those uncomfortable conversations for them to even realize, oh my gosh, this is something I haven't thought about for 10 years, but you're right. I've always wanted to do it. Life just got in the way.
Absolutely. And you've just used the word telling. Our job is not to tell people. Our job is to show people and help them get to the point where they can make an informed commitment, because it's their life. So again, using the golf analogy, the caddy isn't there to tell the player which club to. The player knows how to play the game. They just need some help along the way. And it's about having a conversation that allows the player to get to an informed commitment. I'm confidently making this decision to make this play. It's exactly the same in this lifestyle financial planning model. And the reason I say that the player should be in control, or the client should be in control, is because the client must make the final decision. Because the client is the one that has to live with the consequences. If we're telling people stuff, right now, if we're telling people this is the portfolio for you and it all goes horribly wrong, well, no surprises, the client's going to blame us. We need to get them to the point of making an informed commitment so that they stay in control. And this is a fundamentally different thing. Instead of rescuing people who are victims, we're now actually coaching people to create their own realities. And it's a nuanced thing. I think there's a very fine line here, and that's why I think it's a challenge for a lot of financial advisors to make that leap. Because stages 1, 2, and 3 are still really about us. I'm going to say, this is probably controversial, I'm going to say stage 4 is the only stage that's really about the client. And I think to get there, sorry, I just want to finish that. I think to get there, it's about meaning, and it's about what's meaningful for the client, not necessarily what's about what is meaningful for us. And that's true client centricity, I think.
So Brian, what I'm thinking is, if you're up for it, I actually think, because we're over time here, I would like to have you back on in the next couple of weeks. And actually, I think we can have an entire valuable conversation just on stage 4, talking through what does that really look like? When do you know if you're ready for stage 4 as an advisor? What are things that you could be thinking about earlier in your career to sort of prepare you, as long as you understand what this stage 4 is down the line? I think there's a lot in there, and that I feel is worthy of its own conversation.
I'd love that. I think that would be a great idea.
Perfect. Well, I have linked to the Financial Caddie. I've linked to your LinkedIn so people can connect with you. Is there anything they should be doing in the meantime, a call to action to either join the network or an uncomfortable conversation they should be having with themselves?
Yeah. So the Financial Caddie is a free-to-join network. It's for forward-thinking financial planners who want to develop their proposition. Obviously, what sits inside that is the stage 4 proposition. It's free to join. Come in, kick the tires, come and see what we're up to, chat to some people. We're trying to make it a safe place to have these conversations, and we want to reach a lot more planners that have got to that stage where the meaning has become really important for them, and this is the next step.
Yeah. And I'll say, just in the last week or so, there have been a lot of conversations within the network. I'm in the network around what people's journey has been. So don't feel like you have to be at stage 4 to join. It can be really helpful to see and recognize yourself in other people's stories and be like, yeah, I'm here and I've gone through a lot of the same things they've gone through. So you're right. It's a very supportive area of people that are, like all of our clients, trying to find their way in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Kate. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot me a thought or two. Link to my profile is right below. Stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to hearing from you.